The technology fallacy is actually an interesting result. It actually comes out of 5 years of research that's conducted in conjunction with MIT Sloan Management Review and the consulting firm Deloitte. And what we did over this 5-year period is we interviewed around 25,000 executives, we surveyed 25,000 executives worldwide. We interviewed around 150 executives and thought leaders on this space. And we were able to take all of that and we wrote an independent report each year of the state of digital business. After 5 years of this report, we realized we didn't have it all in one place to tell the overarching story. We had a lot of small stories. We didn't have one big story. So we said, let's write a book. And the technology fallacy, the reason it's titled that way is if there's a core thesis of our research, which is basically that digital transformation and digital disruption of companies isn't really about technology. It's more about the people and how you work differently as a result. I think round one target audience are executives, the average executive trying to lead, the average manager who's trying to lead their business in this new day of autonomous vehicles and artificial intelligence and blockchain and analytics and all of these very crazy technological advances that are coming down the pipeline, and they're trying to sort of figure out, okay, how do I do my job in the midst of this? The other target audience is really anybody who's trying to work in this environment as well. And if there's a key theme of this book, it's that one of the biggest differentiators between the people who get it and the people who don't is what Carroll calls the growth mindset. It's not about being a data scientist. It's not about being a programmer. It's about having the mindset that says I can learn what these technologies do at a very general level, digital literacy, not data science. And I can be forward-looking and I can be open-minded so I can understand how these technologies are changing my business and how I need to revamp my career as a result. And if there's one lesson to come out of this, it's that the average person needs to be in a state of continual learning. And this is what I tell my students in the course I teach here at BC, is anything I can teach you in this course is going to be good for about 5 years. At that point, anything I can teach you about technology is pretty much going to be obsolete, so what I'm trying to do is teach you how to teach yourself, teach you how to be a continual learner so you can keep up with these trends that are changing the world that we live in. A metaphor we use in the book is actually the Wizard of Oz. And so we go through the intro of the Wizard of Oz, talking about comparing the digital disruption that we're experiencing in the business world to the cyclone in the Wizard of Oz. That, there's many parallels that it comes in and takes Dorothy against her will to this brand new world. So the question we ask in the book, how much of the story of the Wizard of Oz is about the cyclone? Well, it wouldn't have happened without the cyclone, but it's not about Dorothy being swept away. It's about finding her way in this new world, this strange new, and if we go to the movie, Technicolor world that's so different from the black and white that is the typical. If we compare this to digital disruption, how much of the story of digital transformation is about technology? Well, we wouldn't be here without it, but it's not about the disruption that happens. It's about making our way through this brave new world that's very different than the world many of us grew up in and were educated in. The key takeaways is right there in the title, that it's not about the technology, it's about the people. And so the subtitle of the book is How People Are the Real Key to Digital Transformation. And what we do in the first section of the book is really make this argument that it's not about the technology. And in fact, some of the things companies and people are going to do have nothing to do with technology to adapt, about reskilling and getting your skill set straight. Then we move into what are the leadership and work characteristics of it. So what are the skills that leaders need to be in this new environment? And what are the skills that workers need? And again, as we surveyed people over 5 years, technology was way down that list of the skills that people needed. Instead, they pointed to things like open-mindedness and flexibility and a willingness to learn. And then our last characteristic, or last section, is really about the culture that organizations need. much to my surprise, a very clear set of cultural characteristics of organizations came through as being essential for digital transformation. And they are things like being more risk-taking, being more agile as a company, learning how to experiment, learning how to be collaborative. And so when I talk to companies about this, and increasingly I'm being invited to companies to talk about my research, they ask me what can they do, and I say I don't know what you need to do with the technology because that's going to differ by company. I do know that every company needs to increase their risk tolerance, increase their willingness to learn, increase their agility, organize differently to accomplish these things, and all companies can start with that. So if there's one takeaway is that digital disruption or this technology is not magic. I can educate any executive to give them what they need to know to be able to lead in this world. So don't be afraid, but embrace it. Because I think a lot of what's keeping companies from dealing with this is just fear or the feeling they can't do it. Oh, I've learned a ton about it. Some of it I've learned about myself. Writing books is really hard. Marketing books is even harder. I am fortunate to have 3 very talented co-authors that we worked extremely well as a team together. So I wrote the first part, or the first draft of the entire book, and it was very academic. And I'm actually used to writing for normal people, non-academic audiences, but it was still fairly stiff and still very academic. And so the 3 co-authors are actually Deloitte consultants. And they came in with all sorts of cool stories and all sorts of interesting anecdotes to really sort of liven the book up. And I learned sort of how to be a more engaging writer as a result. And as our proofers have read this book, one of the comments that comes out is that it doesn't really read like a business book. The technology fallacy reads a little more just like a conversation, and I think that's one of the real accomplishments. As far as my learning, one thing I've seen over the course of 5 years is a real awakening from traditional companies. Many of them are getting on board and really trying to make efforts to make changes. So some of the companies we've worked with have been big ones like Walmart and MetLife and Caterpillar Tractors. And these are not necessarily companies you would think of as digital companies, but they're realizing that if they don't make changes, they may not be here. When I interviewed the chief human relations officer at Walmart, who's actually a BC alum, she said, we know that if we don't make changes in 10 years, we may not be here because Amazon, is growing so fast. And for a company like Walmart, which used to be the 600-pound gorilla of the business world, to say, if we don't change, we might not be here, I think is a wake-up call for everybody. And what they're doing now is making some really aggressive and good changes to help make this happen. We'll see if they can be successful, but they're certainly heading in the right direction and doing the right things. Another thing I learned from doing this book is that the average worker is well aware that these trends are happening. When we asked our survey respondents, to what extent do you think your company or industry is going to be disrupted as a result of digital technology? Something like 87% said, yes, I think my company or my industry is going to be disrupted. Yet only 44% said that their company was doing enough about it. So you have this big gap. Everybody knows it's happening, but less than half the companies are doing enough about it. And employees are recognizing this. When we ask them, to what extent are you likely to change jobs as a result of digital trends, employees that did not feel they were able to continue developing their skills in some roles were 15 times more likely to want to leave within a year. And so you have employees that are wanting to continue to refresh their skills. They want to stay relevant to a digital world, but they don't feel like they're being able to do it in their environment, and they want to find organizations that will help them do that. And what that's creating is an increasing gap between the companies that are doing it right, because the best employees want to work for them to stay fresh, and the companies that are struggling because they have more trouble attracting the right talent. And so the fact that we actually in the book skip all the making the case that this is happening because our research says that everybody knows this is happening. It's what do we do about it is the real key. And that's one of the things that I hope companies get out of it is, okay, it's not about knowing, it's about doing and shrinking this knowing-doing gap. I hope readers will use this. I hope the average person, the average manager of some sort, whether you're a manager of a 4-person team or you're a manager, you're CEO of a Fortune 20 company, will read this book and say, okay, I can do more than I'm doing in this space. In fact, I was presenting one of our research reports at Caterpillar in Illinois, and one of the team leaders pulled me aside and he said, I never thought of myself as a digital leader, but I realize now after hearing you talk, I am, and I can create a more digitally friendly environment, at least in the scope of my influence. And so I think the more that people recognize that the world is changing so quickly. I mean, I'm borderline evangelical. I am a former I'm a current United Methodist minister. In my previous career, I was a clergy person. And I am borderline evangelical about this because I do see the world changing fast. And I do see the changes ahead are even going to be more significant than the changes we've experienced in the last decade. And unless companies begin to wake up and make these changes, I fear not only for the fate of the companies and for my students, of course, and the readers of this book, I want them to equip themselves to stay relevant into the future. I have real concerns about society. I mean, I do think some of the trends that are being played out of increased income inequality, which leads to opioid addiction, et cetera, are really tied to this rate of rapid change. And I think we need to do things to help people adapt to this rapidly changing world. And in one sense, we're digital technologies are creating a world where we're seeing greater inequality. At the same time, they're also making tools available to erase that income inequality. Google has put artificial intelligence tools, ability to learn how to do artificial intelligence for free online to help people learn how to do it. So it's in some ways the golden age of education. We do need to do more learning to keep up because I think the world is changing. And if you haven't refreshed your skills in the past 5 years, I think you're due for a tune-up. But the bright side is there's so many opportunities to do it. And so I just want to inspire people to say, I can do this too. Whether I'm a leader, whether I'm an employee, whether I'm a student, that this digital world is not something to be afraid of. But it can be a beast that can get out of control if we don't have good people step up. And in fact, in our research this year, continues with Deloitte and MIT Sloan Management Review, we're looking at some of the more ethical angles and societal angles to these things. And I don't want to give away too much too early, but by and large, everybody thinks we should be doing more. We as in our companies should be doing more. So we're trying to challenge them to do that as well. The other thing that I hope people will do with the book is just have conversations. I sometimes work with organizations and I say, to what extent has your executive team or even your local team sat down and think about what the world is going to be like in 10 years? And sometimes I go into organizations and do sort of a 10-year strategic plan with them. And at first, all the executives think I'm crazy because they say, how can we possibly know what's going to happen in 10 years? And my response is, well, we may not know, but if we begin to think in this way, we may start to ask very different questions. And I did this at a healthcare workshop I was at. And I said, so we were talking about how technology was going to change healthcare, and all of the other presenters came in with the next electronic medical records rollout, came out with the next technology that they were rolling out. And then I did this exercise of the 10-year strategic plan. And I said, and look, let's just focus on one technology. Let's focus on autonomous vehicles. How are autonomous vehicles going to change healthcare? And we went down and created a list of about 20 different ways autonomous vehicles were going to create healthcare. And then we shifted to AI and some of the others. And then it became painfully clear that by the time their next electronic medical records rollout got far enough along, the world was going to be in a very different place. And so all I really encourage executives to do is once a year, sit down and have a conversation. Think about what the world is going to be like in 10 years, how technology is changing your industry, and at least for a half a day, think those grand thoughts. One of my PhD professors talked. He said, "The history is always best understood from a running start." And the other catch was reverse engineer the future. So until we start thinking about where the world is going, I don't think we can think about what we need to do now, or we may be doing the wrong things now and investing in the wrong opportunities because we don't see the changes that are just around the corner. So it's been an exciting book. I really am proud of it. You know, it's funny, as I've read through it, when I do academic articles, and I've published a lot in the academic space, by the time something is ever published, I am sick of it and I never want to read it again. This one, I feel the exact opposite. Every time I read through, I find it to be better than the last time I read through it. And I see new things that my co-authors have added and such like that. So I think it's a very exciting, easy to read book that anybody should read to help understand sort of where this world is going as far as digital technologies. I enjoyed writing the book more than I ever expected I would. And we'll see. It hasn't been released yet, so we'll see how much work lies ahead. Whether book number 2 is ongoing with this MIT and Deloitte relationship, or I've also been very fortunate to take on leadership to become the faculty director of our Shea Center for Entrepreneurship here at BC. And through that, I'm able to interact and interface with companies, with BC alumnic companies around the world, and I'm learning sort of new things with that, so that may be another angle for a book. But I certainly hope this one does well enough that you'll see number 2 for me. These concepts as they apply to academia, you know, what we're really, I would actually recharacterize it as we're not dealing with the business world, we're dealing with organizations. Because we also looked at governments and such like that. I do think this is both an opportunity and a threat for higher education institutions. It's a threat because I think this model of undergraduate education being bottled up, higher ed being bottled up in the 18 to 22-year-olds, or even graduate, or even bottled up in degrees, is going to be challenged in the future. Because I do think there is a lot about formation, but as we've seen in the book, one of the themes is ongoing lifelong learning. And so I think because ongoing lifelong learning is essential, it means that I think universities need to step up and take a bigger role in educating people as they go through life. And that's one thing that I'm focused on in my role at the Shea Center, is not just educating the students, but helping our students educate our alumni about what's happening and really creating conversations, sort of two-way mentoring, where these really hotshot young students with deep technical understanding and digital understanding can help get our alumni up to speed with the thinking they need, and asking tough questions, and frankly asking some of those questions about what are the societal implications of what you're doing, because I think that's something that's unique to the sort of the BC and the Jesuit tradition, and I think it's something we can really bring back to the world. So I think it's an opportunity for higher education to sort of reinterpret its mission in a digital world, and use these tools and use these opportunities to sort of expand our mission. And I think and I've said that to the administration here at BC, and I think we're doing some exciting things to at least move us in the right direction.